The Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we get a roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Agrimonti.
Here.
Councilmember Cook.
Here.
Councilmember Hundley.
Here.
Mayor Harrington.
Present.
And Vice Mayor Harvey is just running a little late.
Back from Santa Rosa right now, I bet.
He is coming from a Sonoma County Transportation Authority meeting, and he will be here when he is, and he has given us his permission to continue without his presence until he gets here. So with that, we are going to have a closed session at the end of this meeting. We can report on it at the end of that. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-0-1.
On to public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone. You can begin by stating and spelling your name and giving your address.
Hi, Fred Allbach, 19550 8th Street East. And since there's no comment on presentations, I just wanted to say that during this last fire and wind event, I always felt that the city had it covered. And especially from the meeting that happened maybe 2 or 3 weeks before, that went through all of the things, and it was a long meeting, but it was really good. And so I felt like the city really had it under control, and they had the charging area at the Veterans Center had gone through the first power outage. So I just feel like the city did a really good job, and my compliments to staff and everyone.
Thank you, Fred. Anyone else?
That's nice.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. My name is Trent Sanson. I'm here on behalf of DeNova Homes this evening. It's been about a month since one of our agenda items or our projects was before you all on your consent calendar for our final map for Mockingbird Lane. So just since it's been almost a month, I just wanted to come to give a quick status update for you all this evening. Since the tentative map was approved back in January, we've diligently been working with city staff on satisfying all of our conditions of approval since our final map was before you all on September 16th. To bless signature for the final map and the SIA subdivision improvement agreement. We've been dotting the I's and crossing the T's and checking all the final boxes here, and are hopeful that this week we'll get our final map recorded, so our construction loan can get recorded, and then hopefully before winter get all the streets buttoned up and go vertical on the houses for Mockingbird, including the 2 duplex units for the affordable housing component and all the accessory dwelling units with it. So just wanted to say thank you all. It's been, we enjoy working in your town. We're currently building Oliva, the apartments off of West Spain Street, and getting going on Mockingbird, and are looking for more opportunities in town. So just wanted to take your time this evening to say thank you, and we're excited to get everything all finalized here, hopefully this week. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one come forward, I will close public comment. And now on to meeting dedications. I would like to dedicate this meeting to Karin Skoglund. I think many people knew Karin. She lived on Blue Wing Drive, and she was very politically active and socially active and volunteered at the museum, and she phone banked for me on my campaign, and she basically took no flack and had so much fun doing that, and was a independent and just clever and happy person, and it was really my privilege to know her. So I'm saddened by her loss. And Rachel?
I just wanted to add, it was some sudden and unexpected news that we heard about Karin, which certainly also affects me personally, but I would like to think that when I am 75 years old, that I will work just as passionately and hard about my community. And it was barely over a year ago that she was out knocking on doors for my campaign, and she's been very involved in a lot of the projects that have come through, and just kept her fingers and temperature of everything. And it's truly a great loss for Sonoma.
Thank you. Are there any other dedications? No. On to item 3.1 is an update on the PSPS fire wind event.
Great, thank you, Mayor Harrington, members of the council, members of the community. So we were here just a few weeks ago talking about the first wind event and power shutoff, and we've had a series in the last 2 weeks and wanted to provide a brief update to you. So as council knows, the first one was October 8th through the 11th, and this was our most significant PSPS, where basically the entire city and the Sonoma Valley was dark. And we did kind of an update to you, as Mr. Allenbach said a couple weeks ago. We were the only city in Sonoma County to completely lose power, and we were one of 2 hospitals that completely lost power in a generator. And so that situation was not tenable for us going forward. So there were a lot of conversations with PG&E, with the county, and a lot of push that I know the mayor did, I did, other members of our team did, to try to say this is not what it should look like going forward. And so the good news was, I think PG&E also understood that they needed to refine their outage areas. And so for the multiple events we had from October 23rd through the 31st, they really did refine that. So basically 98%, 95% of the city did stay energized for those time periods. There were large impacts still to the valley. And we had some unplanned outages based on other non-PSPS related actions and fires, and the fire chief will go through that. And as council knows, we had multiple red flag high winds, and we had the Kincaid fire starting on October 23rd, and then some local fires at all also, and then a significant wind damage to the plaza and the city streets. So this is a map I want to thank Wayne Wyrick, who is basically kind of my number 2 and in charge of plans for our EOC when it comes to the EOC, and his expertise. So this is really what, for the last 3 PSPS events, what we've had. This is the yellow shows what was turned off. So you can see really from the entire city being dark to just the highlighted areas, this was a significant less impact to us as a community. It's still, so Upper Brazil being residential, it still means the police department and the vets are on generator, and that causes some issues for us, but overall plaza business community was open, and I think that was really important for the valley to have access to those commercial services. So this frankly is, in my mind, if we continue to have PSPS, this is a sustainable model for us. The hills are dark, where a fire could come from, but the city is still able to be energized. So the timeline here, this really shows what we all went through in the last couple of weeks. The red is the red flag warning, and we had 3 separate red flag warnings the last 2 weeks in October, plus then 3 separate public safety power shutoffs. The purple shows when the EOC was activated or in kind of a virtual and on-call status, meaning staff was in town. We put some staff in the hotels that lived an hour and a half away, so we would be ready to roll and go in case something did break at 2 a.m. And then we also had a series of other things. So you can see on the 23rd is when the Kincaid fire hit. We did have a local structure fire on the 25th and on the 28th, and a vegetation fire on the 27th. And again, the fire chief will talk about those more in a moment. And then we had the high winds, kind of those generational historic winds on the 27th, 28th. So that's kind of the snapshot of what we as a community and what as city staff we were working through in those 2 weeks. So I'm going to ask Fire Chief Steve Aker to come up and really talk about some of the incidents we had here in the Valley. And if you have any questions on the Kincaid fire, he can also speak to that, because he was local here, he was definitely coordinating with fire chiefs throughout the county, and a number of our personnel were involved up there as well. So Chief Aker.
Thank you. Hi. Good evening. I'm happy to report out in a little bit more detail about our commitment as a valley to both the Kincaid fire and then what we still were able to accomplish here and protecting our community here in the valley. As we experienced a couple of years ago, it really does matter that other agencies and other communities respond mutual aid and support the community that's being threatened. And with that in mind, with Geyserville, we had crews en route to Geyserville the first night and on the line defending that town and that community. At the height of this, we had, and let me frame this, our normal daily staffing is we staff 4 fire engines in the Sonoma Valley Fire and Rescue Service area. At the height of this, we had 8 fire engines up on the Kincaid fire, as well as 6 overhead positions, so chief officers and others either leading engine crews or being part of the incident and managing the incident. With that, and this is just such a testament to the people in our organization, we had almost every person come back, and even with that big of a commitment to the Kincaid fire, we were able to not only maintain our normal staffing levels here, but actually have it increased here in the valley, which helped us especially on the 27th and 28th when we had 18-acre vegetation fire on Stage Gulch at Boness. Crews did a fantastic job in really, really high wind situation of keeping that fire away from any of the structures. And then we had a fire the next night on Napa Road, just a very short distance from the city, and we were able to keep that to what was involved when we first got there, and that was 2 homes and vegetation. So very proud of our people and our response to the Kincaid fire, also very proud of what we were able to do here in the valley. We were coordinated with all the other fire agencies, Kenwood, Shell Vista, CAL FIRE, and SDC, and made sure that, well, we always work together really well on a daily basis. We just ramped up that coordination to the next level and made sure that on any big incident, on any incident, we were all in to keep those incidents as small as possible and to keep them from spreading. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Would you mind reminding me, so when we have people go for mutual aid, how does that affect, thank you very much and great job, sorry, almost forgot to say that, of course. But how does that affect our budget or your budget? Who pays for the people to go and come back? Is it?
So when we're assigned to an incident like the Kincaid fire, so all the resources that went up there, they're part of the Master Mutual Aid Agreement, and we get reimbursed through OES, through the state. Mm-hmm. So there is no overall impact to our budget.
Oh, okay.
We have to put the costs forward, mm-hmm. During normal employee pay cycles, but then we get reimbursed from OES.
Oh, okay, thanks. And I just wanted to say, it's such a small town, but my daughter's friend, their family owned that house that was burned down by arson on Napa Road, and it is so awful, and I am really glad that you were able to, even though it's so terrible for that family, that you were able to contain it to just those structures.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So, Chief, could I ask, what apparatus do you send to different, are they trucks, engines? What do you send there?
Combination. Mostly, it depends on what the orders are for, but a lot of times we'll send our typically engines, not trucks. We kept the truck in town, and the truck was actually the first unit on the Napa Road fire. But we send our wildland engines that are like the CAL FIRE engines. We have a few of those. We actually have 4 of them within our agency, and we'll send those up. And we'll also send our structural engines up, and they do an equally good job of defending structures. We had a number of our crews that were working some of the lines way up in the hills, but then we also had a lot of our crews that were defending like the foothill and Vinecrest areas when those neighborhoods were impacted in Windsor.
So could I ask one more question? It's interesting, I've been reading lately about prisoners they're low level prisoners, and they've been working for years with firefighters in these fires, and so I understand that possibly there's some legislation out there to help them move into fire service. You know, I don't know what that means, but is that something that's comfortable for you and others? I know they're guarded while they're there, but I just wanted to know what you think about the experience and the type of work that they do.
They do an incredible job. We could not be anywhere near as effective as we are with fighting wildland fires if we did not have those hand crews. The state right now has a number of those camps that they're called crews, hand crews, or crews for short. And again, they do work in the off season. They do a lot of kind of like conservation corps type work, fuels management, trail improvements, things like that. And then during the fire season, they're out on the fire lines. The state's having a hard time right now maintaining as many of those crews as they would like to have for a variety of reasons. And as far as the legislation, I'm not intimately familiar with that piece of legislation yet, so I really would not feel comfortable commenting on that right now.
Thank you. I think for our benefit and the benefit for people watching, for them to hear you say that is really beneficial, because I think, as you said, they really are, a great asset to people who, the
Absolutely.
people that fight fires. Thanks.
So maybe just a few other items too. This fire on Napa Road also led to electrical outages and Comcast outages. I know a number of council members were impacted. You can see the orange there. So that was another outcome, probably for about another good day going through that process. So thank you very much,
Thank
Chief.
you.
So another issue we had is with the extreme wind event that was being described as generational from everything we were hearing directly from National Weather Service and the EOC. And we talked internally, and I made the decision to close the plaza, something that hadn't been done before, but we have these majestic, amazing trees. But if was just worried, people walk through that plaza all the time at midnight and different things, and just felt like we needed for safety first. So we did close it, and we did have we had definitely had major tree damage. I want to thank the Public Works crews. It was closed on Sunday and reopened Monday afternoon, but the crews got in there with some outside contract assistance, and everything was cleaned, and it looked pristine in a very short time. So, and then we also, that next night for the third PSPS event, Public Works staged a bunch of equipment at City Hall, so it was ready in case there were those high winds again, so that we could, Public Works could get to those things quickly, be able to respond, not have to go out to 8th Street. So again, that's some of the preparation and the thinking that we do in the EOC, trying to figure out how to work as efficiently as possible and being ready. I'm going to ask Sue Casey. Sue is in the EOC to come forward and talk about the charging center and the standby evacuation center. Sue's our assistant city manager, but in the EOC, she was in charge of logistics, and these items are there.
So, so the charging center for the first event was utilized heavily. For the second event, of course, because there was really no power outage in the city itself, we did not have a lot of people coming in. We had about 10 people coming in and there was also another charging center at the Hannah Boys Center for most of the valley, but they could also go to places like Starbucks and Pete's and stuff. So it wasn't utilized that heavily. So in the future, if there is if they don't shut off the city, but the valley is shut off, and there is the charging center at the Hannah Boys Center, then we probably won't open a charging station just because it wasn't utilized that much. So, am I talking about the shelter? So, as mostly everybody on the night of the 26th, it was kind of a sleepless night with all that wind blowing around. It was the strongest wind I've ever experienced, and so on Sunday we got in the EOC about 5 o'clock in the morning, and we thought we were going to be setting up a shelter right then. Then it was kind of on again, off again all day long. Yes, we need shelter. No, we don't. Yes, we do. So we were kind of just waiting to see, if we would really need the shelter. And about 2:30, we were on an ops area call, and they said, yes, we do need the shelter. So we quickly moved into action, and we had the Sonoma Valley Unified School District. They were amazing. They were there quickly. They had actually been waiting all day to see if we would need them to set up the shelter for them. So they had kind of been on hold, the maintenance staff. And then John Gurney of the Community Center, city staff, and then we also had the Sonoma Valley Community Health Center on the line, and we all just kind of met and figured out what we were going to need. This was a learning experience for us because normally Red Cross would be the shelter set up, but they were so heavily deployed elsewhere that they weren't available for us. So fortunately, we had gone through training, and we had a lot of handouts and figured out how many people we would need for the shelter. We only were able to deploy 75 cots there because of the size of the vet center. You have to have 10 by 10 space for each cot, and so 75 cots. That's, we didn't know, but we told the county that's what we had, and so quickly got into action and figured out how many management people, staff we would need, and Sonoma Valley Unified School District kind of took charge of that, and then we got the maintenance crew back in, found the trailer from Red Cross. It was actually at the county maintenance yard, and so they brought the trailer over, and it had cots in it, and we got all the cots set up, and then they also had supplies. So I would say within about 2 hours we had that shelter set up and ready to go, and then we were kind of on a hold again, waiting to see if we would if it would be deployed. And also the vet center staff was very helpful too. So I wanted to thank the Sonoma Valley Unified School District. They're amazing. They just hop right in and got it all set up just as they did last time, and we're ready to go. And John Gurney of the Community Center got volunteers. And the next day we had quite a few volunteers show up, ready to go if we needed them. And so again, even though it wasn't deployed, it was a fantastic learning experience for us, because every time we do that, we learn more about what is needed and how to get the supplies quickly, and food and everything that you need. So that's it.
Great, thank you. So maybe just two other things I'll add for council. One, so Sue mentioned when there was a trailer, Red Cross and the county had staged this trailer out here about 3 or 4 days ahead of this wind event. So it was staged here ready, so there were 75 cots, and that I think is a really important kind of piece of emergency infrastructure that we need as a community. We really need to be able to have the stuff local, because I will tell you, the last big win when we had it, knowing that this shelter was fully staged, ready to go, and if something went sideways and we had a local fire, we had a place that was ready. It takes a huge amount of logistic kind of concern when you're in the EOC trying to figure out how to respond, because it's done. But we're not always, this is a piece, actually, I got a call today from the county EOC, and they actually have extra cots that they are saying if cities want cots, you can take cots, and if you're willing to kind of create your own kind of system, you can then have them locally. So I've told them we'll definitely take some cots, and I'd love to work with the council and maybe some service clubs where we can create maybe our own Red Cross trailer, that we really have these assets locally and that we are not dependent, because now twice there's been huge fires to the north of us, and if we hadn't had this trailer deployed here, we wouldn't have had those assets. So I think it's something that we need to look at. I know there were some questions of the community of why didn't we open the shelter? People were evacuated, why wasn't there need? And I just want to answer that directly. So a couple things. One, the county's focus first was to put the shelters along the 101 corridor. It was an easier out for people, and you can see the amount of space each of these beds need. They were looking for large locations where they could have 250, 300 people, because it's almost the same amount of work to stage and set up a 300-person shelter versus a 75-person shelter. Their goal was to kind of have the fewest amount of shelters in the most efficient way possible. So that's part of what they were thinking, number one. Number two, we only have 2 generators in the valley, at Vets and Hannah. So for us, if we had a local fire and needed to use those because of the PSPS, and if something had happened and you lose electricity, there's only 2 sites. So they also wanted to preserve those sites in case something went sideways for us. The third reason was if we did have a local fire, they didn't want any more people in here that they had to evacuate again. So that was all part of the county's thinking. And then they got towards the very end and they thought they were going to need more when the fire was really threatening Santa Rosa. And then frankly, they were at a point of desperation. We need what we need. And that's when where they asked us to set up. So it's definitely this balancing act. We were in regular coordination with the county. They were, as Sue said, off on, because they are managing a whole variety of needs and constraints. And having visited that EOC, I went after our event, and huge amount of work going on up there. So, and I think Care and Shelter, when you think Petaluma alone had 1,700 evacuees, it's just a lot of people that Care and Shelter out of the county EOC was managing. But that's a little bit of the why, if that's helpful. I'm going to ask Sarah Tracy to talk a little bit about public information, community outreach. And I want to say the PIO team is Sarah, Rebecca Barr, and Lori Decker. The three of them together, and Lisa Jansen we brought in for about a day and trying to teach some new folks and build our PIO team up. But I want to turn it to Sarah and just want to thank them for their excellent work.
Thank you, Kathy, and good evening, Council. So public information, let's talk about it. There was a lot of it. There was a lot of it in the last go-around, and we are learning quite a bit about how other people are using the information coming out, specifically about the PSPS from PG&E, kind of their process, how to interpret their process, and also trying to understand what areas are being affected and kind of how to communicate that out to the public. This go around, just like the last, we saw an increase in traffic to our website and subscribers and followers and all of those things, which unfortunately happens during these events. People are looking for trusted sources of information, and I'm thankful that we were able to provide that. That's always the goal, to get out accurate, timely information for folks who need it and want it. As you can see, we have some statistics there for you. The month of October was a busy month for our emergency updates page, which we hadn't used previously before this. It's a page that we created specifically to post a news feed about any particular emergency that might be happening. And so this was an opportunity to use that, and so that people can kind of see the entire sequence of posts that are made about a specific topic, which will then be removed now that the emergency has passed, and can be used perennially if needed. So we saw quite a few views of that, and also of our extended power outage page, which when we were creating thought, like, is this really something necessary? It's necessary. It's getting a lot of visitors, and as we have been looking at the information, we'll be looking at it again to see what we can add to it, or maybe what didn't make sense or wasn't as accurate. As these things have continued, we've learned a lot, and so we will be updating that information as well. We sent out 7 e-newsletters. We kind of had a cycle of information with updates in particular, where that same information was shared on all the platforms we had, so our website, Facebook, Nextdoor, and then also in an e-newsletter just to try to reach the broadest group that we possibly could. They continue to get good open rates. I'm glad people find them readable, so that's good. So Facebook posts were getting a lot of shares depending on what the information was. Facebook algorithms, of course, are always changing, and they just went through a few different policy changes. So, we're always hopeful that the information reaches people, but people often check our page. We'll specifically look for our page to look at the last updates. So we were getting a lot of traction there. And Nextdoor, we got about 6,500 total impressions from all the information we put out. So we were fortunate in this event. The last event, there was, I think, more in-city in particular, more just trouble getting online. People had trouble on their cell phones accessing information. That didn't seem to be quite as big of a problem. And speaking as someone who lives further up Valley, I also had much better reception this go around. So people were able to access information much easier, so that was helpful. But we also were making copies of that information. We're working on a way that we can have a kind of more of a bulletin board for people to physically find the information as well. We did this time have a new coordination with the county's Joint Information Center, also known as the JIC. It's based in Santa Rosa. I haven't visited it myself. I was hoping to, but things got a little exciting, so I ended up staying close to home. But this process where the JIC reached out to local PIOs in various cities around the county and other organizations as well to kind of ask for your updates on a regular basis to then integrate them into their joint information update sheets that they were putting out. Their fact sheets is what they were calling them. Of course, as things were getting progressively more challenging for them because of, than their area. I understand their JIC was threatened and maybe they were going to have to move and they were dealing with a lot more things up there. They kind of stopped that for a time to get a handle on things. But it went well, and I look forward to working with that group further. We also did some promotion of 211, which I understand worked much better the second go round, although because of the amount of people who were seeking information on shelters, there was a time when I think there was a challenge getting a hold of 211, but we understand it really did take the pressure off of 911 operators. So getting out that information more will be a focus we have, and we do have a meeting with some folks from 211 to learn more about how we can work with them in the future. Certainly, this is not a new issue, but many of you may have seen on television broadcasts that there was a rather large statement made about there being evacuations in quote-unquote Sonoma, which, as we know, we're a city, we're a valley, we're a county, we're a brand name of clothing and a truck and all sorts of things. So the name it sometimes gets a little bit confusing, and certainly regionally, this isn't anything new, but definitely still something we need to think about, especially when these regional emergencies happen and you kind of see Sonoma, and also for locals who were paying attention and had been getting nixles and thought, oh my God, are we being evacuated now? And what else is happening? So there were some questions around that, and that was part of the job too, is making sure that we're kind of monitoring what questions are out there if they're not being reached out to us directly. I know many of you also probably fielded some questions regarding that. And then there were physical, word of mouth is truly always the best way to get information out and from people they know. And I know that council did some walkarounds with information that the chamber helped put together, which I think was very helpful, especially for our business community, and interviews done on KSBY and also any media relations there. And everybody's sharing the information. There's a lot, we're a community after 2017 fires. There's been a lot more community information sharing and a lot of efforts there, and we just try to play our part within that.
Thank you.
So maybe just a few other, here's some of these things we've talked about, but going forward, some key items I want to pick out here. We are going to be looking some additional costs to kind of do some hardening. We need some additional permanent or temporary generators. We need fiber into the EOC for Comcast versus the wire right now, which caused us some glitches. We worked through them, but it's not where we should be. And then, like I talked about, some shelter equipment. There's also this longer-term regional reputation consistency. So with the business community and tourism is something that I think it's going to be a challenge. And I don't know yet what our revenue impacts are going to be for the month of October. And we'll definitely report that out in a couple months as we bring those back. Some things we're doing now is we are putting together our after actions. There's a 211 meeting. We'll be doing a comprehensive cost analysis and summary we'll give to council and looking for grants. There is a council subcommittee on the PSPS resolution, so we'll look to try to bring that back to the next meeting. And then we'll continue to look to see how we can improve. Again, want to thank all the folks that were involved in the charging center and shelter teams, because I think, again, it was good practice even if we didn't deploy. And great appreciation to the team, your city staff, both professional management, our line staff, public works. People were dedicated. They are out there until 2 a.m. Doing what needed to happen. And so just really appreciative. And I also want to thank the city council for your support and the outreach and the work that you all did during this event too. And the big thing also, the Kincaid fire is 80% contained. As a community, we were lucky on this one. We really sat a little bit as bystanders and, have great empathy for our colleagues to the north. But feel fortunate that we were not in the eye of the storm on this one. So next at least week, it looks like calm weather. I don't think we may be completely out of this yet. If we can get to November, if you remember, the campfire started November 8th. So we still could have another wind event or something in November. But here's some additional updates, and they are looking for a resident experience that we'll be pumping out as well. So appreciate all of council's support, and that's the end of an update for you.
Thank you very much. Are there any council comments? Councilmember Hundley?
Yes. First, I just wanted to thank all of you that are here and those that are not here, because I think about 2017 and I think that we all did a great job. It was hard, but just looking at how far we have come and all of this since then, it's just amazing. And I've been telling people before we had our first shut off that I felt like the little city of Sonoma was one of the cities that were taking it the most seriously, and I think that we really were with all of our planning. And I just think the execution of this last one, it was amazing, and I've heard a lot of positive comments from the community, and I think people really notice that there are a lot of systems in place. The communications alone is just like night and day compared to what we had a couple years ago. And I know that there's room for improvement, but it's amazing. And I think that people really felt it, because in 2017, there was like this vacuum of information in vehicles that people paid attention to, being mostly social media. And so we are like in there. So I'm super proud of that. And I think it made a huge difference. And I know that we have a lot of things left to work on. The things that I worry about are this time, people in the valley had some problems with cell phones, but communications contingency plan for in the event that we actually lose cell signal is something I worry about. Doing things like getting some direct fiber will be amazing, because internet was the other thing. Internet and coffee is the things that people seem to want the most. And then also, this didn't happen as much in the city, but we see it in the valley of all of the homes that lost power for 5 days, and the big impacts on food and food waste. But also, I think that perhaps countywide there needs to be sort of more strategizing about the information that's given out prior to a shutoff to people about, the potential food impacts, and sort of trying to get, and then there's the aftermath of sort of making up for things. The food thing, I think there's much work to be done, but I think that is like a bigger thing that we can work with our county friends on. But overall, and Fire Chief, we're always thankful to have you, and we got off pretty easy this time, but I think that it was a really fascinating exercise to see, even though it felt really scary, because I think a lot of us were just re-traumatized from 2 years ago. But thank you all.
Councilmember Cook?
Yeah, I just want to thank all the first responders and city staff. I really felt, very proud through this, knowing that staff was out there communicating. And I know my colleagues and I went around all the businesses and were talking. And it was really nice, because they all said, well, we have almost all the information. So it was nice that knowing that information was out there. So I appreciate it. And Steve, thank you. We're not out of the woods yet. So I tell people to, be very diligent this time of year. Hopefully we'll get some rain in our future. But thank you. And thank you, Sue. I know that you worked very hard, and the school district. I went down there to help the guys dismantle, and I've never seen such a hardworking group of individuals. So I was very proud of staff and everybody involved.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Just echo the comments. Extremely impressed with everybody. You guys have your professional duties that you do with the city every day, and then to flip into EOC role and handle that so beautifully and seamlessly, just really, really impressive. Excellent job, and thank you for the long nights. The city really appreciates it. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of work, and just that was wonderful. And to Steve and the fire team, fantastic job. A lot of resources allocated to other areas. Incredible to see the whole county be able to manage all these resources coming from other areas and allocate them in the right direction. Really sounds like the town of Windsor was completely saved from a really dangerous situation in that way. And then also to be able to handle 2 fires in our own backyard, put them out quickly. I mean, just it's unbelievable, really, what you guys achieved through that under your leadership and with the hard work of all the men and women who work for you. Just really fantastic, and I couldn't be more impressed with the team. Really appreciated the opportunity to go out and talk to business owners. I think it was really reassuring to hear from somebody that, you know, your power is going to be on, barring another wind event. I had a woman at a Chinese restaurant she was like hugged me. She was so excited. She's like, oh my God, we'll have power. So it just goes to show how important that is and to keep our businesses open. And I appreciate your efforts there, Kathy, to reach out and push back with PG&E and just with a note with PG&E, management level and CEOs get and deserve a lot of flack, but their workers were out there working extremely hard as well, long nights, long days, and still are. And I think those linemen deserve all of our respect as well.
Thank you.
I think a couple of things. Thank you. First, Kathy, when I heard about 211, I thought, oh my God, what a mess that's going to be. But obviously, it's evolved over the years because it was pretty spotty in the beginning. And it was really manned by volunteers, which, you know, wasn't working. So I was really happy to hear with the role that they played. And also, you know, business, Mark Bodenhammer, the woman from Scandia Bakery said they visited her because obviously she wasn't closed down at all. So I think she was really fortunate. But business and the Visitors Bureau were right in there with you. And I think that had a lot to do with your coordinating with you and your staff of making that one full group of people. And as well, the other thing is I'd like to do a shout out to Councilmember Cook's wife, Kirsten Cook. We had all these pictures of fires, and then there was a picture, a simple little picture with a purple or blue circle around the city of Sonoma, far away from the fires. I had people calling me from all over, my relatives, and I sent them the picture, and they were so happy to see that we weren't burned.
Yeah, she got 110 shares on that.
Honestly. So the other thing I wanted to let you know, this last experience that we've had, I saw on the Women's Club agenda, they're going to be looking at ways that they might be able to volunteer their building or, you know, serve as some type of I hope not a charging center because we're pretty old. I don't know if we could do that without burning down, but they want to provide something. So I just wanted to thank you. But thanks so much. You were just wonderful, really. You know, you've accomplished so much, and I think the first time around was a learning curve, and now we know that you're there. Done. Thank you.
Well, I was thinking during this report, what a terrible thing to have to get good at. But it looks like we're doing it. And it's taken a tremendous amount of effort and coordination, and it seems like we're in a good spot. And there are, aside from PG&E caused disasters, there are other things like earthquakes and other things. So I think probably everybody is in a better spot, and also the public will continue to get more prepared. So I think that's good. Forward going, I have concerns, which I don't know how we'll work it out, but I would like to know, in terms of staff burnout, having 3 emergency events in 1 month is tremendous. So I don't know how that's going to be managed, but obviously people need to see their kids and their spouses and their friends. People need to have lives. So I'd like to know, maybe you guys can think about that. How will we manage that? I think a second post-emergency issue is also managing people's expectations about what the city can do on various projects and how we can best discuss that. We'll obviously bring it back to the whole council about what can get done the rest of this year council-wise, but I think making clear expectations for other people so that we don't have people say like, oh great, you're back at work, we want all our stuff done immediately. That's not reasonable, and that's also going to contribute to complete staff fatigue. So I'd just like to hear back later if you have some ideas about how that might be managed in this world. And I guess my third kind of question is on the, and it's actually, that's also a similar question for the fire department too. It's like, if there's constant emergency, how do people get enough rest to be fresh as they can be? And then if it turns out that the typical area without power is where our shelter is and where the EOC is, then long term, is there a better spot for it? Is there some other? I mean, I know we can get, a better generator or something, but just long term, is that the right spot? And are there other spots? Those are some questions I have. But I think, I'm so glad you guys are working on it, everybody. And I know it's a huge sacrifice and also like a lot of heightened adrenaline, which, you can only run for so long. And so I hope we do figure out this year. I don't know if people need extra time off or what, but I hope we figure that out. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for your comments and your support, and yeah, definitely looking at how do we recharge and say thank you, because the month of October has been a huge impact to staff and to their families, whether it's city, fire, police staff. And so it's definitely a conversation that I'm having internally. And, there is going to be a reset, as I've told each of you. There's some things we thought we were going to be able to accomplish this fall that not everything's going to get done. But we'll get some of the key priorities done, and then we'll do some priority setting, and we'll be talking more about that. So thank you.
Great, thanks. And with that, we can move on to item 4, the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Any council member want to talk about this? All right, I will take it out to the public. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I will close the consent calendar and
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
roll call.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti. Aye. Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Now on to item 5.1, our public hearing. Second reading of the ordinance repealing chapter 14.1 of the Sonoma Municipal Code, reenacting a new chapter 14.10, adopting and amending new construction codes and adoption of findings, etc.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. At its last meeting, the council introduced the proposed ordinance to adopt and amend the 2019 California Building Standards Code. And for the benefit of those here tonight, I'll provide a very brief overview once more about the code adoption process. The new model codes are published approximately every 3 years. The state adopts and amends those codes and reprints them as the state building standards codes. Local enforcement of the state amended codes is required beginning January 1st of 2020. Local jurisdictions may amend the state adopted codes provided that the amendments are not less restrictive than the state codes, and provided the amendments are based on findings of need related to local climatic, topographical, or geological conditions. Local amendments to the codes are typically needed by cities and counties to provide regional consistency and enhance code requirements due to local conditions, dealing with items such as hazardous building materials, fire sprinkler systems, firefighter safety, and administrative provisions, including green building standards. Local amendments being proposed by this ordinance are generally consistent with the existing policies and construction requirements previously adopted by the City Council and are outlined in the supplemental staff report. Examples of local amendments include clarifying administrative provisions, providing a higher level of green building standards to help meet City Council climate protection initiatives, providing a higher level of protection measures and operating permits to help the city maintain its Class 1 ISO rating. In terms of financial impact, each time the new codes are adopted, construction codes typically increase as a result of the addition of more restrictive and complicated requirements. Staff is recommending that the council hold a public hearing on the proposed ordinance, publicly read the title and adopt the ordinance, and direct the city clerk to prepare a summary and carry out the special publication procedures as required by the government code. One thing that I would say is that prior to the public hearing, if the council would like to discuss any issues related to fire sprinkler systems, I think that came up at the last meeting, might be a good time to do it before opening the public hearing. And if there's any amendments that need to be made to the code, we could actually look at doing that before the public hearing and go from there.
I'm confused. Isn't this the public hearing?
Well, you haven't opened a public hearing as of yet.
I think I did.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
Yeah.
my mistake. Then, in that case, what would have to happen is that if there are changes to be made after the opening of the public hearing, then the ordinance would need to be reintroduced.
Oh, okay. Are there any council member questions?
On sprinkler systems, I think Kathy and I discussed it this morning, and I feel that threshold is $100,000. For me, it was kind of draconian, because I don't know, me personally, we put in sprinkler systems, and which, is fine, because that's the way that it was, but I still think it was somewhat draconian. So I still believe that this is a wonderful document. I would be there to approve it, but I would just like possibly to take a look at this sometime in the future, how it relates to the real world.
Mm-hmm.
I might suggest that then sometime in the future, we could bring an agenda item to modify the trigger points for the ordinance and take construction inflation into account and modify it accordingly.
I would support that.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? I will take it out to the public for public comment. Fred? I'll take it out to Fred for public comment.
Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East. I wanted to ask Wayne or to make a comment that with the council adopted climate protection measures, I believe that a number of them had to do with existing solar and new solar, and they had some rather large possible numbers of greenhouse gas reductions associated with them. And so I think that with this going, I think Wayne came to the CSEC and talked about this at one time, and it would be good to see with this new code how those can be quantified going forward, so that the city has a bit of a measure of how this is impacting the city's climate reduction measures, because the green building codes is something that the council was looking at by adopting those 21 or 22 climate protection measures, and the existing solar was one where there was quite a bit of GHG that could be done. So it would be great to see that get done and to have that be quantified.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Robbie Leeds. I live in the Springs. I moved to Valley of the Moon 1979. Been here 40 years, born in San Francisco. Needless to say, the events of the last couple of weeks triggered a little PTSD, brought about by my 3 weeks of being evacuated 2 years ago. Since that evacuation, my partner and I have put solar on our roof and made our house a passive solar house as well as active, and it's enjoyable watching the needle spin back to the grid when the grid's up. But as you all know, the grid was down last week, and I am a viewer of the Springs community Facebook page as well as the Sonoma community Facebook page, and on both of them, the suggestion that the wealthy Valley of the Moon create a microgrid with a bottom-up solar roof provided electricity base as something to prevent this apparent new normal. I just wanted to mention all that, give it a thought. Hopefully before this criminal and bankrupt company PG&E is taken over by venture capitalists and is put up for, what do they call it, leverage buyout, we might think about being ahead of the curve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I will close public comment. Do we have a motion? Like you gotta read the whole title. Does somebody want to venture to do it?
You do it?
I move to adopt an ordinance repealing Chapter 14.10 of the Sonoma Municipal Code, reenacting as new Chapter 14.10, adopting and amending new construction codes, adoption of findings, determining the ordinance to be exempt under California Environmental Quality Act. There you go. That's it, right? Boom.
Second. Roll call.
So can I ask a question before we vote? Do we have to mention anything about what was discussed about maybe possibly looking at the issue that we, okay.
I would suggest you do this action separately, and then, and I heard, I saw a consensus head shake to kind of bring that back, unless
We won't close out the item after the vote. We can
Yeah.
continue discussing it. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just related to Robbie's comment too. I think that times are changing a lot, and that there'll be 3 years, I guess, before we do this again, and perhaps there could be. I know that the council. I don't know the last time the council's really had an active part about thinking about things that we might want to have in there, but especially things related to energy. I think there are opportunities there, and it's going to take complicated things to think about, but I think there are many opportunities for us to think bigger and also think about the problems that are now going to be a part of our lives. So
I agree. Thank you for that comment. Can we have a roll call? We did.
it was me.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
And then we had a additional item, which was that we wanted, do we need a motion or direction to staff to bring back some?
I think you can just do his direction. If I saw a head shaking, I think from all 5 of you to look at bringing back to the council a review of the fire sprinkler, the kind of the trigger level for renovations of what the trigger level would be, so that it is connected somehow with construction costs, et cetera.
Is that, sorry, I'm so sorry. Is that the only like monetary trigger that we have in the code?
Related to fire sprinklers or to other triggers as well?
Generally, like outside of California standards, are there other triggers where you're going to do X number of dollar amount in renovations, and therefore you have to do these additional things?
There
as a
are some
result?
additional triggers for various things. For instance, if you do $1,000 in permit valuation, you have to put in smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms. If you do $40,000 worth of work, it triggers our public improvement ordinance that requires improvements to curb, gutter, and sidewalk. So there are some other, those are the 2 that come to mind, but there are some other financial triggers.
I would be interested in kind of looking at some of those, or most of those personally, but I don't know if we want to keep it restricted to fire sprinklers, but.
I mean, I think we could look at them, but it would be helpful to know the date the dollar amount was selected, and then maybe we could just look at inflation to see how it compares in today's dollars.
I agree.
If that's not a huge project, I don't. Okay. Anything else on this item? No? Great. I'll close the public hearing. On to item 6, the regular calendar of the City Council. This is consideration, discussion, and possible action to adopt a resolution authorizing the fire chief to accept a 2018 staffing and adequate fire and emergency response grant award for 3 additional firefighter paramedics to staff Fire Station 1 and approve fiscal year 2019-2020 budget amendment of $114,272. A funds commitment of $114,272 for fiscal year 21. Well, this says 21-21, but maybe it means 21-22. And a $297,108 funds commitment for fiscal year 21-22 for the SAFER grant required local match of funds. On to our fire chief.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I'm very pleased to bring before you a recommendation to authorize our acceptance of a SAFER grant. It's through FEMA, and this is the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response grants. These have been in place for 10 or more years, and the goal is to help jumpstart communities and their fire protection via these grant funds to meet or to come closer to meeting national standards for response in terms of number of firefighters per engine company, as well as firefighters total assembled on the fire ground. So we had one of our captains, Captain Gabe Sternus, wrote this grant for us. And what we looked at our whole Sonoma Valley Fire and Rescue Service area, which we needed 12 positions based on 3 platoons. We have 4 engine companies that would get us a 3rd career firefighter on each engine company. That is our accepted staffing level through both our strategic plan and our normal operations. Historically, those 3 people on the engine company have been filled by 2 career firefighters and then a volunteer. We would pay a stipend to fill the 3rd spot. Well, as challenges have evolved and increased with maintaining volunteers for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is pressures on housing costs and time demands, the need for a lot of times 2 incomes within a household. Just times have changed, and so the volunteer service has evolved as well. We're finding now that we're no longer able to fill that 3rd position with a volunteer reliably, especially during what are normal working hours, during midweek, during the daytime. And so what we've seen here is that FEMA and the fire grants people have evaluated our situation and agreed with us that we do need that level of staffing here. And so what I'm bringing before you is the request for the city to approve spending the funds that are noted in the summary for the city's share of this. So the city has 1 engine company out of the 4, so we're looking for the city to accept the cost share for 1/4 of the grant or 3 positions. And we've already had the Valley of the Moon Fire District and Glen Ellen Fire District, who we also serve. They have accepted the cost share for their proportionate share of the grant.
Are there council questions? Questions? Councilmember Hundley.
So I know that this grant comes from FEMA, and just in light of the news lately about a threat to cut off FEMA funding to California, would this be a part of that? Or if it got, because it was granted before then, would we be?
I have not heard anything that grants that have already been awarded would be affected by that.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Sure. Years ago, there was the crime bill, obviously, and something similar to this added police to forces. So I spoke to Kathy we were talking about this, and I'm comfortable with the way this is being handled because, in year 4, there's no funding. But, you know, there are things like attrition, there are people who transfer out, there are all different ways that this might work really well. So my fears have been allayed, and I'm happy about that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No, I'll take it out to the public for public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back for council discussion or a motion. Vice Mayor Harvey?
I mean, to me, accepting this grant is part of our climate resiliency, and this is part of our fire resiliency, and I think the need is pretty clear throughout the community. So I appreciate your team's effort in going out to find this grant. I spoke with Kathy, and maybe it's worth it to just kind of get on the public record the kind of sources of funding that we're talking about here, just so that that's clear to members of the public. But from what I've seen and what I've heard, you want to lead with that, and then I can.
I'm
continue.
happy to. So part of what Sue Casey and myself and talking with Chief Akers reviewed, and so just there's about for the 3 years, the city pays 25%, 25%, and then 65%. So over the 3 years, it's about a $520,000 investment by the city, and $845,000 is paid by FEMA. So we have a variety of one-time funds that are available that fully cover this. We have a reserve balance that we share with Valley of the Moon. The city's portion is somewhere about $600,000. So that alone would be one-time money. You could do a match. There's also Medicare reimbursement, which is a separate kind of an IGT fund, and there's another about $750,000. So there's two fairly significant buckets of one-time money that we could use, period. Another piece of work that Chief Akers has done is had a consultant come in and review the whole kind of revenue structure and how the EMS charges are done. I want to thank him for his leadership there. We're still going to be taking a look at that, but the bottom line is the report believes that there could be about $320,000 in ongoing funding that could come from some revamping of some of those emergency medical response charges. And then the county, the Board of Supervisors tomorrow is going to consider whether to put a fire grant on, and this has been an effort that the fire chiefs have been working on for over a year, and Chief Akers could answer more questions on that of council, but that would be a half-cent sales tax in the March ballot. And the exact pieces, I think you know what that means to the city, but it's somewhere potentially in $500,000 to $600,000 ongoing, if that would be approved. So financially, we feel very comfortable that there are the financial resources to make this investment for 3 years, and potentially that there are things in motion that could allow us to continue to retain the services afterwards.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's great, and I think that this is a really great partnership between the city and the fire department. Fantastic job, and SAFER's got to be one of the best thought out acronyms I've heard in a while, so that's pretty good too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is great, and given our increased, needs, it's good to have a grant that can pay for the majority of it. That's wonderful news. And I guess I'm just wondering, where will the new people come from?
Great question. So we actually have just put out a recruitment for lateral firefighter paramedics. And it's something that, a lot of agencies can't do because they're either, once people get started in a career in a department, there's not a lot of lateral movement within the fire service. We were able to get 3 really good qualified firefighter paramedics from other departments, which I think really says a lot about our department and our people and the community that we serve. And so that was one small step. The grant doesn't actually start the funding period until March. So we've put out another announcement to test more, and then we're as part of our strategic plan, we really value and put a lot of efforts into home growing our workforce, and so we've got a number of folks that are right now in various processes or various stages of the paramedic training process. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to secure a couple more local folks within that group.
Yeah, I was curious if the cost of living here was prohibitive to recruiting people.
You know, not so much for the recruiting. Where we see the cost of living have more of an effect is actually keeping our firefighters living in town. So, you know, when they're ready to start a family and buy a house, that's a challenge, as we all
Right.
know. And so we've seen a number of cases where folks have had to move a little bit distance to be able to afford that.
Okay, thank you. I support this, by the way. Anyone else?
I will make a motion to approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma authorizing the fire chief to accept the 2018, is it 18?
Yes.
That was right. 18 staffing for adequate fire and emergency response SAFER grant award for 3 additional firefighter paramedics to staff Fire Station 1, as written in the packet.
Second.
Roll call?
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Yes?
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Madam Mayor, could I just,
Please.
you know, there's something that's very important. The pancake breakfast is back on.
Yes. Thank you.
November 17. So I'm excited about that.
I am too. I am too. We were disappointed, you know, for obvious reasons. We had to reschedule, but
We had to put our aprons away.
I know. Mickey Mouse. I will promise you a Mickey Mouse pancake.
Oh my God, please don't do that.
Thank you all very
Any
much.
other comments? Okay. On to item 7. Thank you. Council member reports and comments? None.
So at the Sonoma County Transit Authority meeting, which is what was kind of made me late for this one, we're discussing this new initiative by a group called Faster Bay Area. They're trying to put a 1-cent sales tax for basically Bay Area transit. We're not sure if it's going to get on the ballot or not, but there's a current request from SCTA to hear from cities about projects that we would request be done by them. And so I just want to put it out to staff that it's literally, they have like a week timeline by the end of the week to get it in. Just so and it's minimal, just like, hey, here's the project and here's a dollar amount that we'd like. They want to put this money in because the North Bay, if we had our own 1/2-cent sales tax, we'd recover something like $16 billion over the same time period. So we want to have as many projects as possible to put in there in case this happens, that we have a budget request that would bring that money back. So just bring that to staff to be aware of.
We're going to have a 12% sales tax. Anyone else? City manager? Comments, announcements?
Yeah, so just briefly, Governor Newsom made an announcement about 2 weeks ago for these PSPS resiliency allocation to cities. So it's about $10 million. That's not a lot of money when you think about the number of cities there are that have been impacted by these PSPS events. There's about $2 million that's peeled off the top for the 4 big cities and $8 million left. So it's due in about a week. It was supposed to be due today, and they extended it a week. Staff's intention, it's a very straightforward grant. Our intention is to turn in an application requesting the max, which is $500,000. Don't think we'll get that, but really laying out requests for a variety of generators. City Hall, Police Department, it's not City Hall, Carnegie, thank you, and looking at maybe Vintage House, and then the school district would be another location, but those dollars are much larger. So just wanted to apprise council that we're going to be seeing if we can get some additional funding. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, city attorney, anything to delight us with? No. Next time. All right. With that, we will adjourn to closed session.
We need to open up for public comment before you adjourn.
Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on our closed session? No? I will close public comment, and this is regarding Carla versus City of Sonoma.